Change my name. Hi, Wendy. Can you hear me?
There, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear and see you. Wonderful. Oh, Jana is coming.
Yay!
And then it looks like still waiting on Lucy here in a couple minutes.
Hopefully, good, I can just sit here eating.
Oh, that's okay, yeah. Jana, you still need to turn your video on when you're ready.
So it's sticker.
There you go.
There's Jana. Hello.
The good news is that since I sent out an email that you all received saying about our limit on people, since then I have had some people respond saying, I'm fine to watch the recording later. And then we also have people already waiting in the waiting room who clearly want to attend a live one and are like trying to get here ASAP. So, yes, so we have positive reactions all around from what I can
Good. I like that. Ah.
And around.
Okay, let me look. Lucy, there she is. It's nice. It's sort of like, I don't know if you can hear it, but it like sounds like a doorbell ringing when someone enters the waiting room. Dee-dee, dee-dee. Hey, Kim.
Hi. Hi, Kim.
I'm from the same room, but not be in the screen. But I just wanted to say hi first.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
We're trying to minimize the number of dial-ins because we're a little over the ante on this game.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I've got a few people, I think 7 emails have said the recording is actually better for me or happy to watch a recording. So there's some people certainly voluntarily just using that option, which is great. And I definitely assume people signed up just to mark it in their calendar.
Totally.
Oh, I
They're
do
not
that.
gonna make it, so I think hopefully we'll come in just really close to 100 is the idea, and
Nice.
we'll figure it out.
Fingers crossed.
Yes, fingers crossed. Okay, great. So is everybody, before I let any of the attendees in, or I'll wait for Jana to come back.
Need to use the facilities. She'll be back.
Oh, that's totally fine. I just did the same thing. Okay, let me make sure.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi. I'm okay. You can hear me. Everything is good?
Everything's
Everything's
good.
great.
Perfect.
I made a checklist for myself. Lucy, do you want to try sharing your screen right now just to make sure it works?
My cat wants to be on TV. Hello.
That's great.
Big cat.
Perfect. That's awesome, Lucy. That's beautiful.
Good.
All right. So yeah.
Oh, I missed the cat. I missed the cat.
Oh, she can come back. You want to see Lucy? Yeah. Back by popular demand.
Oh.
She is.
Oh.
Look at
Oh.
Good question. Very nice, Kitty. Can you all see the slide, the welcome slide?
Yep.
Is it just the slide, or do you see all of PowerPoint?
All of it.
all of it.
Shoot. Okay. What about now?
There you go.
Okay. All right. Now the challenge is that I've got that's just on in the background, and my waiting room is over here. Okay, that's just a little wonky, but once I'm going, I can change that. Okay.
And which view should we be looking at? Like you said, to put it in, do we put it in?
Oh yes, whatever's best for you. It's the top right corner. So if you have a gallery view, then you'll see everybody in a grid,
Okay.
up to 25 people. And then once it's 25 or more, then you click the arrow and it'll go to the next 25. If you prefer, though, you can also do speaker view, and whoever is talking at that time, or whoever like makes a rustling sound, which is why mute is helpful, will appear on the screen, and then you'll see everybody else as like a little grid across the top or a line on the side. So it's whatever you prefer.
I think when you're sharing the screen, it's always the people are across the top, because with your slide there, I don't see the option for gallery view or tiles. But that usually.
If you move your mouse, do they appear?
No, not there. Not that I wanted to change it.
Really? Oh.
But it was there before your slide came up, so I just wondered if that's just me.
Oh, sure. I can't remember. Shoot, now that I'm a host, I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, mine does. Mine appears if you go up to the top where it says you're viewing view options.
Oh yeah, I see that.
If you click side by side mode,
right,
then you get.
Gives me the option for original or full screen.
James finishes.
Oh,
well, that's okay. It's not that I wanted to change it.
Okay.
It's fine the way it is.
Yeah, sorry about that, Wendy. Yeah, but if you want, play
No worries.
around with viewing options or something like that, you can just click around in the settings.
Oh yeah. Did you say you wanted us to mute ourselves and stop our video when the other presenters were presenting?
Yeah, let's do that just to keep it a little bit easier.
Okay, I'll try to remember.
Yeah, so I can always verbalize a reminder. I'll be unmuting and muting throughout.
Yeah. You have the power.
I have the power. Great. Are you all feeling okay? Ready to go? Any questions before I let people in?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Good.
Okay. All right. I've got 12 folks, so I'm just going to admit them all right now.
Woo! I'm pumped.
Yeah. Feel free if you want, panelists, if you want to have yourselves muted right now, you certainly can. You don't need your volume on if you prefer that. Hi, folks who are joining us. Welcome. Go ahead and if you can keep your videos off if you want. That's totally fine, and possibly easier for the information. And go ahead and keep yourself muted. We're glad you're here. I'll keep admitting people as they join. We still have 5 minutes to start, so feel free to run to the bathroom or get water or check your email or let the dog out or whatever today is asking you to do.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, go ahead and keep yourself muted while we
Okay.
get started.
All right, will do.
Thank you. I have 3:30 on my phone, but let's just give people a couple more minutes to figure out the technology if needed, and then we'll get started. All right, in the interest of time, we can go ahead and get started. As people join in, I'll just admit them to the meeting. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on starting seeds. It's great to see some familiar names and faces, so thanks for joining us. If you would like, this should make it easier to also see what others are sharing. Feel free to keep yourself muted throughout. And if you want to turn your video off, that's also great. Allows just a little more of the information from the panelists to come through. And also, you don't have to feel distracted either. So if you want to keep those things turned off, feel free. Just so everyone knows, we are recording today. So this is being recorded. So also if you don't want your face on the recording, feel free to turn that off too. Any questions you have for myself for technological things or for the panelists on seed related things can be shared in the chat box today. And you can access the chat box by moving your mouse around on the screen, and then should be on the bottom or perhaps on the top, depending on what type of device you're using. There should be a box that says chat. And once someone adds something, it'll flash orange, and you can see that if you'd like. So you can send those directly to me. I'll be collecting the questions throughout the hour or half hour of sharing, and then in the last 25 minutes or so, we hope to share those questions with the panelists and get some answers. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen at the moment. Great. And I had just a couple of other intro points to share with everyone. We do have resources. If there's a question today that we don't quite get to, or if you're just curious another time, we have put together a list of resources Many of them focused on northern growing, but not all of them, some just more general. And that's on the Roots to Harvest website under workshops. So that document is available to you and those resources are available. If you need help locating that, just let me know. If you have any feedback on the webinar, please feel free to email me. You all have my email now that I've sent you an email this earlier today. And this recording will be made available after the fact. I'm hoping, I think by noon tomorrow, it should be emailed out to all of you and available on the Roots to Harvest website as well, if you want to reference something in the future. We plan to do a couple intros and then let each panelist speak about their section on seeds and starting seeds, and we'll collect questions throughout and then ask them at the end. So again, questions to the chat. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So let's just do real quick intros from each of our panelists. If you could share your name, your affiliation, and your years growing or dealing with seeds, or however you want to do that. So let's start with Wendy, and then we'll go to Jana, and then to Lucy. So Wendy, you would start us off?
I'm Wendy O'Connor, and I run a small market garden out here near Murillo that supplies a couple of the local farmers markets, and I've been growing for decades. But one of the interesting things I'm involved in now very much is Superior Seed Producers, which is a small grassroots organization that grows seeds here in the Thunder Bay region. There's one of our seed packets. A lot of you are familiar with them. So a lot of my garden now is devoted to growing seed, but it's also devoted to growing food. So I hope to be able to contribute some stuff today.
Thanks, Wendy. Go ahead, Jana.
Hi, I'm Jenna Van Blyderveen. I'm the grower for Roots to Harvest. This is my second season growing for Roots. And then we have 2 urban gardens that produce food for CSAs, markets, and to put by. We're also in partnership with Lakehead University, Lake Superior Living Labs Network, and the Superior Seed Producers, and the Baudo family, and they set us up with seed trials so we could try them out in northern climate here in Thunder Bay. And these trials are to help seed producers to scale up on their production, whether or not they're successful. I've been growing, I don't know, I was raised on a farm and have been around that environment since a child, so long time.
Thanks, Jana. Go ahead, Lucy.
Yes, my name's Lucy Lavoie, and I also produce seed for Superior Seed Producers. I've been growing an urban market garden, not market garden, just an urban garden, a garden in my backyard and my neighbors' yards, and for about 35 to 40 years. So I've been doing this for a long time and still love it.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, and Lucy, yeah, you're starting us off. So Jana and Wendy and I will turn off our videos and mute ourselves, and we will let you take over for the next 10 minutes or so.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to set up my stopwatch so I can see when I've done 10 minutes. And if you want to give me a 2-minute warning, Rachel, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
This is totally bizarre. I'm so happy that you guys are all starting to garden, and I wish I could all see you all, and I wish I could see you all in the garden because it would be lovely. But nevertheless, I'll just talk to my computer screen and imagine you out there. It's kind of intimidating if you're a new gardener and you're going out to choose seed, and you kind of look around and you go, there are so many things available, so many different varieties. It's kind of hard to know what to buy. Basically, I'd say the primary thing that you could consider is, well, buy veggies that you actually really like to eat. Because one of the things that can be very disappointing is if you grow a garden, you get a bumper crop of turnip, and you don't actually like turnip. And suddenly you've got all of these turnips that are beautiful, wonderful, but you don't like them. So what I would recommend, first of all, is that you actually grow vegetables that you really like to grow. Think about multi-purpose vegetables as well. For instance, if you're thinking of maybe you want to support wildlife or support birds in your garden as well. So you could do something like, here's a really great, oh, I'm trying to share my screen, but I don't think I can do it like that. I think I have to share screen first, sorry. If you look at something like,
That's great, Lucy. We can see that.
okay, I've tried to turn off this participants coming in because it's really, oh well, I don't know why I've got that happening, but yes, so if you look at something like this is actually a scarlet runner bean. We grow these along a fence line. They're a pole bean, really tall, beautiful vine, beautiful flowers, good beans, and absolutely fabulous hummingbird flowers. So in growing good beans to eat, we also get wonderful flowers and hummingbirds in our yard, which is really fabulous. And this is what the dry beans look like. They're totally gorgeous. Purple, blue beans, and they make fabulous chili. They're really nice in a soup. So there's an example of choosing a vegetable or choosing a seed that has multiple purposes. Not only is it a good food crop, but it helps to support wildlife. And there are many other kinds of things like that that you can do in your garden. So kind of think about what it is that you want to plant. What do you like to eat? What kinds of things do you want to support? Do you want a beautiful flowery yard? Think about those things and then make yourself a list of the vegetables and the flowers that you think would achieve your goals. The next thing you have to do is research. And one of the things that and of course it's easy for us to do research these days because we're all at home anyway, so we've got time to do research. One of the things that you can look at, what one of the most important things you need to know is how many frost-free days you're likely to have where you're trying to grow your garden. And I recognize that people who are attending this are from all over the place, so I can't just tell you. Here in Thunder Bay, we have 94 frost-free days, more or less. Keep in mind that frost-free days are just an average. Sometimes you'll get more frost-free days, sometimes less, but they're a good starting point when you're choosing seed. And easy enough to find out what it is, just Google your city and frost-free days. And my cat has come to visit. Here she is. I'll put her down on the ground. There we go. God, this is really distracting to do this from home. Whoa. Anyway, yes, frost-free days, really important. And why is it important? Because every vegetable that you want to grow will come in a whole bunch of different days to maturity. So you can, for instance, here's some sweet corn. This is a sunny bee corn, and you see that thing in the corner? It says it's ready in 60 days, right? That's a pretty short amount of time. Also sweet corn, and in the corner, as you can see, it says it's ready in 72 days. So these two corn are ready. This one is ready 2 weeks later. 2 weeks can make a huge difference when you're trying to get a crop to eat. That number, the 60 or the 72 days, is called the days to maturity. That's how many days it will take from the time you put your corn in the ground, your seed in the ground, to the time that you get a cob. And so what you'd like to do, ideally, is find vegetables that will mature that you can harvest within the number of frost-free days that you have in your growing area. Personally here, both of these will grow in our growing area. The golden bantam, which is a longer variety corn, is really great for us because this one will mature. We'll eat some of this, and then this one will mature. And so we have a much longer season that we can eat corn in by planting the two different varieties. So one of the things that if you buy a seed that will grow, that will mature within the days to maturity, or the frost-free days that you have in your area, it also means that you don't have to start seedling indoors. And that's, for me, as far as I'm concerned, the less I have to start indoors, the better. Because You know, it's just things grow better when you start them outside anyway, for the most part. If you want to save seed, you have to add probably a couple of weeks onto the days of maturity, because although the corn will be ready in 60 days, if you want to have the seed, it will take another couple of weeks for the seed to actually mature. So another thing that you should consider when you're choosing seed is the exposure in your yard. Do you have a lot of sun? Do you have a lot of areas with partial sun or part shade? And that's really important to know, because some plants, I mean, everything likes a lot of sun for the most part. But if you have a lot of, you know, part shade areas, well, then maybe you'll be wanting to grow something more of things that can handle part shade. Like peas are pretty good at handling part shade. But corn, not so much. Corn likes to have full sun. So it's important to kind of know these things so that you can plan your garden a little bit better and know which kinds of seeds to buy. There's a lot of information on the backs of packages, and I always recommend, and this is also what will happen if you look online through some of the online catalogs, they will also have this kind of information. For instance, this one says, in addition to saying that it's 72 days to harvest, it also says that it's a sweet heritage variety, a favorite since 1902. And that's one of the other choices that you have when you're buying seeds. Do you want to buy heirloom varieties or heritage varieties, or do you want to buy hybrids? And what's the difference? A heritage variety is one we call it breeding true. So in other words, if you take a golden bantam corn plant, cross it with another golden bantam corn plant, the corn that you'll get will look exactly like what you harvested year after year after year. It basically is genetically stable. On the other hand, if you take a hybrid like Sunny Bee, the way this was created is by crossing parents that had different characteristics. So maybe one of the parents was starchy and tall, and the other one was short and late season. And so you cross them together, and when you plant the seed from this, you can get anything. You can get short, sweet, you can get tall, starchy, depending on what the parents were. And so that's what a hybrid is. Hybrids are good because they are targeted to specific growing conditions, or they can be good. However, if you want to save seed, they will not necessarily breed true. And so that's something to keep in mind.
Lucy,
and of course,
I just want to let you know we got a couple minutes left.
thank you, Rachel.
Welcome.
And the other option that you always have, of course, is between organic seed and conventionally grown seed. I always recommend that people buy organic seed whenever possible, because it encourages organic farming, which is something that I think is really important for the health of the soil, for the health of the planet. And so hopefully these are tips that will help you when you're going out to choose or thinking about what kinds of things you want to grow in your garden, or when you're going out to choose seed. The other thing I would strongly recommend is that you buy local whenever possible. And of course, I also have these superior seeds. Although right now, I believe that we're totally sold out. But if you're in Thunder Bay, this is a very good source of local seeds. And just buying from your local landscaping areas, your local nonprofits is always a really nice thing to do. One other tip, if you have someone who grows a great garden around you, just ask them what they're growing. What varieties are they choosing that goes in their yard? And chances are you'll get some really good tips. And that's it for me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucy. All right. If you have questions for Lucy, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll just ask them at the end. But Wendy, we're going to have you join us and go ahead.
Okay. Further to what Lucy was saying about the seed packets, I just wanted to point out that there's 3 seed packets. You can tell I really like beets because most of my seed packets here are beets. But on the back of the seed packet, All reputable seed sellers put instructions on the back of the packet, and they have a vested interest in those instructions being correct because they want you to love those seeds and love those vegetables and buy more seeds again next year. Unless, of course, you've saved seeds. But, you know, if you're wondering specifics about how to grow this particular seed, the back of the packet is a good resource. And of course, now that we have the internet, which we didn't have when I began, it's easy to find information about spacing, you know, what to, how far apart to plant the plants, how far apart to have the rows. So you don't have to go very far. And also, as Lucy said, ask your neighbors who are also growing, because they're a tremendous source of information that's specific right to your neighborhood and how things grow where you are. So my little thing here is about starting your seeds. And of course, some seeds you would be starting indoors, and some seeds you would be starting outdoors right in the garden, depending on the type of seed. A question came in from one of the participants asking specifically about germination time. How long does it take the seeds to germinate? And that does depend on the type of vegetable. Parsnips, for instance, are notorious for taking forever. You can plant them and you may be waiting for up to 3 or 4 weeks for them to show up, but they will show up. Other things pop out of the ground very quickly, like radishes. And for seeds that you're starting indoors, one of the best tricks of the trade for most seeds is to keep them warm. And you can aid that just by keeping them in a warm room, the warmest room in your house, or you know, keeping your oven on very, very low and just setting them on top. That works if you needed to heat the room anyway, so you're not wasting the heat. Just be careful they don't dry out. And the other way you can start seeds is on a heating pad. You can buy custom heating pads for heating seed trays, or you could even use a sunbeam heating pad that you're supposed to use on your arthritic shoulder, set to low. It'll keep your seeds, you know, it'll just feel a little bit warm to the touch, not hot, on the top of your soil. And that's just for germinating them. You don't want to keep them too warm once they've started growing, because that'll cause them to grow too fast and they'll have a lot of quick, soft growth on them. So for most vegetables, they want to be a little bit cooler after they've germinated. So going down my list here of things, seed expiry is another concern for new growers. If you have seeds that someone's given you or you've been saving for yourself, how long can you keep them? Is there any point planting them after a while? And I believe we might have another webinar later in the year about seed storing if you're interested in your saving seeds from your crop this year. But in general terms, it depends on the vegetable. Some of the seeds that expire quite quickly, you know, if you've had them for 2 years, you might as well throw them away. Carrot, parsnip, onion, most flower seeds are fairly short-lived. Lettuce, it's worthwhile just to get a new packet of those, because you waste a lot of time with seeds that don't grow. You just don't want to do it because it takes as much trouble as seeds that did grow, and you're out that amount of time. Seeds that last a little bit longer, beets, peas, all the cabbage type crops, kale, radishes, broccoli, cauliflower, those ones, 2 to 5 years for those, and that's assuming that you're storing them in a cool, dry place. And seeds that last a very long time, it's just amazing how long they will last. Beans, everyone knows the story about someone who found some heirloom beans underneath the counter of the old gardener in the neighborhood that grew after 25 years. Well, they can go longer than that. Melons will grow after 50 years if they're stored properly. All of the squashes, zucchinis, pumpkins, that kind of thing, those seeds will last a long time if they're stored properly. So that's just a little bit of a guideline on that. When you go to start your seeds, aside from following the directions on the packet and researching and asking for advice, you don't need anything fancy to start them in. You know, you'll see all these little greenhouse things you can buy online and whatnot. And those are fine for certain purposes, but you don't have to get fancy. I use, this actually is a germination tray. It's about 14 by 8 inches, and it has little holes in the bottom. you don't want your seeds to get waterlogged. You don't have to have holes in the bottom, but you don't want your soil to be too wet. So that's just a handy thing I have lying around. But one of the easy things for people that haven't started seeds before is just to go and get some aluminum trays at the grocery store, like loaf pans, cake pans. These will last several years if you clean them when you're done. And of course, they're fully recyclable when they're no good anymore, so make sure to recycle them. And another nice choice, especially if you're avoiding plastics and things that don't recycle well, is these kind of fiber pots. And I was just looking inside this, as I brought it out, and it says it's made in Canada. So woo-hoo, fiber pots. These are available from garden centers sometimes, and often in your Canadian seed catalog, you can get these. They nest together and they ship, you can get about 50 of them into a reasonable size packet, and they're light as a feather. So it's not a bad idea to get those by mail order. So, and then to what to grow the seeds in. And this is kind of a big topic. And again, there's no magical answer to that. What you want is a soil or a mix that is fairly fine so that it won't cake and crust and have big particles in it that keep your seeds from coming up. So anything you find commercially that says it's a seed starting mix, or usually a potting soil, those are all just fine. Triple mix also is available in bigger packages because people use it outside in their gardens, but I find often it's even better than potting soil to use as seed starter because it tends to be ground up a bit finer, and it's got a lot of fertility in it because it's partially compost already. So I've tended to start using triple mix, but whatever you use, and I've found this is kind of funny, even some of the really premium ones, you riffle through them with your fingers and you start finding big pieces of bark and whatnot. So if you're starting seeds, especially little fine finicky seeds, just go through and take those particles out. And plant your seeds according to the directions. Keep them moist and warm, not too wet, not too dry. Don't let them dry right out. And they'll reward you by coming up. I have something here, one of these fiber pots. This is for show and tell. These are some marigolds that I started in a fiber pot just about 3 weeks ago, and they're already getting their secondary leaves. So the nice thing about the fiber pots is you don't tend to get waterlogged soil because the fiber actually breathes a little bit. So they're a little easier to deal with, especially for beginners.
Wendy, just so you know, we've got a couple minutes.
Okay, a couple minutes. What else have I got here? Talk about which seeds to grow indoors and which to start outdoors I've got on here. So I'll just go through that fairly quickly. Indoor seeds, especially for vegetables, onions, we're a little bit past it. So if you were going to grow onions, either wait for next year or get seedlings because you start those in March. Likewise with tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers, they would need to have been started already mid-April or so. But if you're just starting out now, you can still easily plant indoors any of the cole crops, broccoli, cauliflower, kohlrabi, that type of thing. And then you even have a little bit of time to spare to plant things like cucumbers and squashes. They can also be directly seeded into the garden, but I find in Thunder Bay, I buy a little bit of time by planting those in early to mid-May and then planting them out in early June in the garden. And that just gets them started a bit quicker. And then your outdoors planting, as Lucy said, you have to watch the frost dates because some seeds you don't want to plant until more or less the last frost. They're going to be covered in soil and not sprout for a little bit, so you have a little time to play with. But around the last week of May, first week of June, you can go into the garden and you can plant peas, which actually you could plant even now if you can get into your garden that's not too wet, lettuce, beets, parsnips, carrots, and radishes. Those can go in just before or around the last frost date, and then after the last frost date, you can go ahead and put in beans, cucumbers, and squash if you haven't started them already. Any transplants that you have got from garden centers go in after the last frost date. And potatoes. I'm sorry, you just have to hold your horses with your potatoes. The soil is still too cold, even if you have a beautiful sunny day. But I generally plant my potatoes in June, never in May. So that's it for me, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. That was great. At this point, we'll turn it over to Jana, and you can share what you'd like to share.
So your seedlings have come up, and this is a squash seedling, and we have the 2 first leaves, and then we have its first true leaf right there. And then you'll have to water them. So for what I do is I get a tray, which Wendy was showing, like the aluminum foil, that would work well. You fill it up to about a quarter of the pot, and you just let it sit in there for like 15 to a half hour, and then dump out the excess water, and that should be sufficient moisture for the day. But check the following day, and it may be okay till tomorrow, let's say. And you'll know when to water it when the soil starts to pull away from the edge a bit of the pot and then dry out on the surface. Try not to use any hard flow for water. You can just place soil, uproot the roots, and their roots are very tender right now. So it's, yeah, soaking them from the bottom up is a better method than directly above. Or you could use like a spray gun mist it. That also works. You want to give them 12 hours of direct sunlight. You can also use substitute lighting. If they don't get enough lighting, they'll get weak and laggy and spindly. It's not what you want. And you should rotate them in the light. So you just flip the tray around, and then let's use this as an example. The sun was over here, and it didn't get enough sunlight. It will grow towards the light. So if you flip the pot around, it will start to correct itself. But you just rotate your pots once a day. If you're using grow lights, don't use incandescent bulbs. They'll be too hot and it'll burn the leaves. And it doesn't have the correct wavelength for plant growth. You can use fluorescent bulbs. It has the perfect, there are grow lights that are specific with the red and the blue light requirements. You can pick these up anywhere. Home Depot sells them, Canadian Tire. Your head shops also, the cannabis growers love to grow their stuff inside, and they have like pretty good equipment for growing inside. You should have the grow lights about 2 to 4 inches above your seedlings. And they'll need a period of rest of light. So they'll be in light for 12 hours, and then you can cut it off there and just give them darkness. Clean your bulbs. The dust buildup will reflect the rays differently. You also have to create airflow between your seedlings. So in this pot, I had 4 seedlings, and then you could pick the strongest ones, and you can just snip the other ones with the scissors and then just discard them. You could pull them out, but you have the potential to disturb the roots of the plant remaining. By removing some of them, you can create more airflow around them, and it'll, if you have a fan on them, it can make their cell walls grow stronger. And they're going outside anyway, and there will be a bunch of wind stuff. You want them to be able to support themselves to get the nutrients up to where it needs to be. And you have to fertilize them, but the seed has enough nutrients in it to set its roots and first leaves. I showed earlier that these are the first leaves here, and this is a true leaf. I would start fertilizing my seedling now because its true leaves have come up. And what I would use is just like a really diluted fish emulsion, or kelp also works. And you can continue to fertilize them every week until like 2 weeks before you start harvesting like any fruit or leaves from any of your plants, just because you don't want to have all this excess nutrients, and it makes the flavor of the food different, not what it is true to be. And then, so after 2 to 3 weeks, you have a small little seedling and the true leaves came up. You want to pot on, or I call it also transplanting. This is usually when the seedling is about like 3 to 4 inches or as large as its pod that it has been planted in. And then you could just plant them into 3 to 4 inch pots, which I think this is a 4-inch pot that I have here. What you're gonna do is add some water to your potting mix, but you can do this squeeze test. You'll squeeze the soil, and if there's water dripping from it, then you have too much water in. You just want a nice, consistent, moist soil. And then you'll dig a hole in the center of the pot, and then you'll drop your seedling in, but do not squish the stem of the seedling. It will just end badly for your seedling. It will probably not survive. Leaves, they'll come back, they'll grow back. So if you lose a leaf, it's not the end of the world. Just be very gentle with these seedlings. And then when it's time, the frost date has been reached and you're like, okay, I could start planting outside now. You want to harden off your seedlings. This means that the light inside your house is different than the light that is outside. The rays are much stronger. So you want to go put your seedlings on the first day in some shade for like 2 to 3 hours, and then bring them back inside. And then the following day, you'll do the same thing, and it's like a week process. And then you could slowly expose them to more and more sunlight, and then they'll be ready to transplant. You'll give them a bit of nutrients at the time of transplant, and then you'll water them sufficiently. And then you can direct seed into soil. I have a very neat map that we'll share.
That's great, Jana. We can see that.
Perfect. And you can see like when it is time to transplant outside, some will have to be covered with row cover to like help or have them not be damaged by frost. It's also a good addition. Yeah, this is a great resource if you ever need to fall back onto when do I put my plants outside, or do I need to cover them, when to direct seed your things. This is a great resource for that. I think it is on the page which is sharing this webinar. All right. That is what I have, but yeah, does anyone have any?
Great, thank you, Jana. Yes, I think that chart is currently missing from our resources page, but we can definitely add that.
Okay.
And I believe West Coast Seeds has 3 or 4 of those charts prepared for different parts of Canada, mostly the western side, but we could add those since folks are joining us from all over. And some of you might be closer to British Columbia weather than Ontario weather, you know, or Northern Ontario. It's just a little different. Okay, so folks, if you have questions, that is the end of what we had prepared to share with you so far. And if you have questions, I have one right now, and oh, you met time limit. Good job. So go ahead and write those in the chat. They can be specific to perhaps you planted something a couple weeks ago and now it's coming up and you're not quite sure what to do next or things like that. So go ahead and add those in the chat. We did have a question about fish emulsion, and Wendy, you answered that in the chat, but I'll read it aloud now here in case people are struggling to find the chat. Fish emulsion is a natural stinky liquid fertilizer available at garden centers. Works very well. Dilute with water according to directions. It's compatible with organic gardening. I guess I have a quick question that can get us started is how do you decide which fertilizers to use? Do any of the three of you have preferences that you could suggest to us or things that you've learned have worked well or not well? If you could share a little bit more on what you've chosen there, that'd be great.
Actually, I can put in my 2 cents because Jessica out there in gardening world has already mentioned fish emulsion. If you wish to garden fully organically, add good compost or manure to your garden every year. And you'll find that some vegetables that are very heavy feeders, tomatoes is one, may start to run out of fertility before the end of the year, no matter how well you fill your garden up with manure and whatnot. Then the fish emulsion is one of the best amendments I've ever found, just to give them that little perk up. It's fairly high in nitrogen, but it has the other elements as well, and trace elements in it because it's a natural product. So I've just had good luck with that.
And I also use a shitload of manure. And in addition, in the beds that I don't rototill, we just turn over each bed as we go. And in the beds that we plant, we also put in a bit of wood ash, a bit of bone meal, a bit of rock phosphate, because we're a little bit low in phosphorus in this area. And if it's a really special crop like tomatoes, I'll also add some kelp meal, a little bit, and a little bit of blood meal. But be careful with blood meal because that's really high in nitrogen and you can just get this massive bloom of leaves that are then very susceptible to aphids.
I use much the same, like I put down compost or manure. I use alfalfa pellets, which is really good. It's also rabbit food. It comes in these small little pellets. They're green and they're just extra biomass and full of nutrients for your plants. Rock phosphates as well. I have to add a bit of sulfur and boron to my fields. Yeah, it's great to test your soil to know what you're starting out with. So I definitely get your soil tested. Compost teas are great. Mycorrhiza, which is like a mushroom inoculant that you can add, is added to some potting mixes that also help. They are beneficial to your root system and they'll help plants take up more nutrients. So it's a nice symbiotic relationship that happens between mycorrhiza and the root system of your plant. Definitely look into, yeah, mushroom compost. I've looked, you can't get much here in Thunder Bay other than in bags, but yeah, find a mushroom farmer.
Awesome. Jana, could you write mycorrhizal in the chat just so folks know how to spell that because it's kind of a doozy? Wonderful, thanks. I'm going to follow up with Kim's question because it's related to fertilizer, and then we'll jump back to Amelie's question. So given the concern with Norway rats, that seems to be more specific to Thunder Bay, but other folks have rodents as well. What's the best way to environmentally fertilize your garden? Or I think perhaps more broadly, thinking about rodent pests or mammal pests and what are options you can use there?
I'll just jump in and say the things that we've been discussing with the compost tea, the manure, the fish emulsion, and whatnot. None of those attract rats. What attracts rats is leftover seed, for one thing. Anything that's actually edible. So you just have to think like a rat. What would a rat like to have? The other thing that rats will gravitate towards is any kind of bedding material. So if you have straw bales or, you know, just a lot of loose organic material around your garden, rats may be burrowing into it. They may be looking for food. So just remove anything that you think might be attractive to a rat. And there's no reason why gardening should attract rats at all.
I use eggshells around my plants to deter slugs or cutworms, but I bake them first and crush them up, just like the leftover residue on there just is smelly and it attracts rats. So that's my little tip there.
How, Jana, could you let us know a temperature and a time for baking those?
Oh, anything over 100, 350 for 10 minutes.
Okay.
Probably less time than that, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Lucy, did you want to add anything or pop to the next question?
I love Think Like a Rat. I really like that one.
Excellent. Okay. From Amelie, is it true that depending on the winter and spring season, that will determine whether peppers will be hot? And so I guess I'll expand on that and just ask if that's not the case, what is it that determines a pepper's hotness or anything like that?
I have never heard that the particulars of the season determined how hot a pepper is, but maybe that has passed me by. You know, Laura is always interesting. As far as I know, the hotness of a pepper is determined by the variety of the pepper. And you can find lots of interesting charts online that'll tell you just how hot a jalapeno is compared to a habanero, compared to a ghost pepper. It goes up exponentially. But I've never heard that it was related to season or growing conditions.
And I agree. And I also want to point out that within a pepper, you have the hotness will vary from the tip to the stem attachment. So that's the other thing to keep in mind. But as far as I know, I agree. And I just read, I heard if you leave it on the plant longer, it will be hotter. You have to let hot peppers that you have to make sure that they reach their days to harvest, again, to go days to maturity. A mature pepper will be hotter than a immature pepper. And so even if you're growing a hot variety, if you harvest it too soon before it's had a chance to ripen, it will not be as hot as it could be.
Great, good advice. And it looks like Jonathan is agreeing with that information on our chat as well. Great. So leaving the pepper on longer will help it become hotter if it's a variety that gets hot in the first place. Great. Returning to soil questions, is there any soil you recommend to start a vegetable garden for in-ground and also for container gardening? I know we mentioned the soil to consider for your seedlings. I'm wondering if that's the same for when you transplant or direct seed into the ground.
I have a mix that I use for peppers because I grow all of my peppers in pots. It's half, it's almost half, a little bit, half compost or well-aged manure and half peat. And then it has a whole bunch of nutrients in it, bone meal, all of the things I talked about, rock phosphate. I can share that with this particular recipe. It came from a book, I think it was called The Green Goddess, someone in Minnesota who grows indoors, and it's a fabulous mix for growing peppers. I can't imagine that it would, I would imagine it would be good for just about everything else. I don't know, but that's what I use.
Great, Lucy, if we connect, I can share that out through the folks who are registered over email or post online. We can talk about that, but we can share that.
I've noticed, and this applies particularly to container gardening, if you're buying something to put in those containers. I'm like Lucy, I kind of make up my own little mix out of what I have to hand. You know, I use some peat moss and a little bit of mineral soil out of my garden and some compost, and I just mix it up. But if you don't have those resources, then once again, triple mix is the closest approximation. The nice thing about it is it does contain a little bit of black earth, which has a bit of mineral soil in it, because peat moss based mixes like potting soil don't have that mineral content usually, so your plants can be lacking a little bit in that. Some of the packaged soils I've been a bit disappointed in. There's one that used to be good. It's a no-name product called Super Soil. It used to be super, it's not so super anymore. It's mostly bark and ground up branches. So you will find that sometimes in packaged products or bulk products, and just, you know, buy a small bit of it at first and see if you like it. And otherwise, if it's rough material like that, it's not that it's bad, but you'll need to mix it with something else as well.
I agree with what they said there.
Wonderful. Speaking of soil amendments, the mention of minerals and peat and different things, is there a good resource that any of you know, books or websites or blogs or groups of folks to discuss soil amendments, perhaps?
I know of one. It's called the Living Soil Symposium. It's based out of Montreal. I will share the link. They're really good. They had some like testimonials of farms that were conventional at one point and just like, we can't do this anymore because the land is too degraded. We're running into problems. It was great to hear their words. I will share that right now.
Thank you, Jenna. That would be great. So we'll look for that in the chat in response to Taylor. And let's see, Allison has a question about germinating seeds. Has anyone tried using a willow water solution to help encourage root growth? I've heard of folks grinding up aspirin and putting some at the bottom of containers before potting plants.
I haven't heard of that one. Obviously, it has something to do with salicylates or salicylic acid, and there may be something to it. It would be something to Google and find out. A similar one I have heard of that has some scientific basis is to use a little bit of kelp. You can, you can buy that as an agricultural product, or even if you had kelp capsules as a nutritional supplement, you could dissolve them in water and water seedlings with it, or even use it to stimulate root growth on cuttings. And there is scientific basis for that because of certain compounds that are in the kelp. So such things do exist. And maybe aspirin is one of them, or willow water. That I'm going to look that up.
Great, thanks, Wendy. If other folks have questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I have one because these three ladies are much better at growing things than I am. I have planted some seedlings and I've had them out for a couple weeks now, and I just learned from Jana 20 minutes ago that I should have been rotating them every day, but I haven't been. So I'm wondering at this point, is it worth rotating them if I have some seedlings started and the parsley is definitely getting a good lean to it towards the light? Should I rotate it at this point, or have I passed the point of no return?
Oh, you can rotate them. I mean, it's funny to watch them move. I have ones that are leaning in my house too because they don't get enough, but yeah, just go ahead and rotate them. They'll be fine. Plants are hardier than you think. They can take quite a bit, but yeah, resilient.
Great, thank you. Well, we have about 8 minutes left of our scheduled time. So if anyone has any additional questions, go ahead and share them. If you really want to turn your video on and give us a wave so that we know you're a real person, that's also okay at this point, since we've gotten through most of our content. We've got some friendly faces out there. Wonderful. Hi, folks. Great. Well, we've hit a pause in our chat. So, hello.
Hi, I'm new to this. My name is Gloria.
Hi, Gloria.
I'm wondering, we put our seedlings in the bedroom window, so they get sun all day, but they also, we just realized, get the street light all night. Is there something wrong with that? Or should we be closing the curtains at night?
Great, great. So what should we do at night? Any advice there?
Gloria, I wouldn't worry about the street light, although it looks bright to you. It's far, far less powerful than the sun, and I doubt that your plants will even notice it. If it makes you feel good from now on, you could draw the curtains, but I really doubt it'll make any difference at all.
Great,
Okay.
thanks, Wendy. Thanks for the question, Gloria. We do have another one from Kim. Great. In Thunder Bay, we are experiencing unseasonably cold temperatures. What does that mean for planting on schedule?
I can, it's at this point in time, it depends on where you live, of course, but you can already be planting many of the varieties that can grow in cool conditions. Like you can plant peas. Spinach is very frost hardy, so even if it comes up and it's still very cold, it'll do just fine. Lettuce, your onion sets are probably okay as well. You can be planting really quite a lot of things. With respect to the soil being warm, it's still pretty early in the season, right? I mean, we kind of forget because we had a really nice couple of days that were just summery and we somehow think it's summer, but it's not. It's still only the first week in May. And I would say, do what you normally do. Wait until you have a couple of days of really, really warm without any frost in the near future, and you can plant your beans and your corn. But you should wait till the soil is warm.
Is there a general time of year when the three of you would plant potatoes?
We plant our potatoes earlier because our soil here is fairly warm, so we don't wait until June. We'll probably be planting them probably next week, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, it's the same. I also heard a tidbit from Marcel and Brennan, who owns the BG farm, that if you delay planting them until late June, you have a possibility of missing the potato beetle. So, I mean, that's great. But yeah, your potatoes might be a bit later, which I don't know, could be okay.
I have found that when I've planted my potatoes, weather conditions haven't been good. Usually my gardens are suffering from being too wet and I can't get onto them. So my potatoes sometimes go in June 15th to June 20th. And by the end of August, I can't tell the difference. So I've realized there's no point for me to run the risk of those potatoes rotting in the ground because it was too cold. I wait till conditions are quite ideal for them. Now that'll be different if you live in Southern Ontario. You can certainly be planting in mid-May, usually in Southern Ontario. But for Northern Ontario, be careful because I know a lot of people whose potatoes have rotted because they had a cool, wet early June, and that was the end of them. So, but none of us has a crystal ball.
Great, thank you for the feedback. That's great. Okay, well, let's take this last question from Taylor. Should flowers be removed from tomato and/or pepper seedlings before transplanting outdoors? And if so, at what point should you stop? So I take it those flowers are actually on the tomato and pepper seedlings already. And should we take them off of that plant?
I've never actually done that. It doesn't sound like a bad idea. I can see the idea is, the plant will have transplanting stress, so it's best if it's not trying to create fruit at the same time. But usually the plant itself takes care of that. Those blossoms will simply drop and it'll make more blossoms when it's ready to bear fruit. Having said that, if it makes you feel good, it doesn't hurt to take those blossoms off.
And I never take mine off in the same way. I'm very careful about hardening off my tomatoes and peppers very, very gradually and never planting them out on I try to get a few days in the forecast where it's going to be not sunny or cloudy, otherwise known as, and I'll plant them then. And that really makes a big difference. And often flowers have not aborted, which has been really nice.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for being here and sharing your knowledge with us. Thanks for folks who attended. I hope that you found this helpful. And the recording will be made available and sent out to the registrants over email and also posted to the Risk to Harvest website. And just in case folks are interested, our next webinar will be gardening in short growing seasons. So a little bit of overlap with what we had today simply because of where we're located, but this will be more specifically talking about climate. Graham Saunders will be joining us That's next week, a week from today, Thursday, May 14th at 3 p.m., not 3:30. And Roots has posted on Facebook and Instagram about that, and the workshop registration is available on their website under workshops as well. Thank you for the thank yous. You're welcome. Not that I did most of the work, we had our panelists offering the knowledge. So we appreciate everyone. If you have specific questions or feedback on any of this, again, feel free to email me. I will put my email in the chat box now. Feel free to send me any messages and I can pass those on or implement any helpful changes for our coming webinars. Otherwise, thank you and have a beautiful day and good luck with your planting this year.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.